Drafting a Best Ball Mania 4 team over at Underdog Fantasy with the Best Ball 3 regular season winner, King Kupp. That is what we were doing today on RotoViz OT. We had a fun kind of preview show. We talked through his experience of winning that last year. We talked through some of our thoughts on what we might do in this draft and much more on our Monday edition of RotoViz Overtime. So check that out if you haven't already. We're going to be drafting right now, right here. We're going to find out as we talk what our draft slot is. Talked about it. You seem to want to draft at the right-hand side of the board, so a late round pick. So we'll see what we get here. Did do a tweet over the weekend to find out what the listeners wanted us to do. Shawn, I was asking if we should do a robust running back draft or a ZeroRB draft. Very, very close here. 45.5 versus 54.5 in favor of ZeroRB. So we'll see what draft slot we get, and we'll see what we pull off here. King Kupp, what are you hoping to do here today?
Well, I'm hoping to do ZeroRB, and I think that we're talking about uniqueness. I think it's pretty unique to do ZeroRB on the left side of the board.
What are you thinking, Shawn? We get the 104 here. We're up and we're in an interesting spot.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to be. It's not my favorite. As we mentioned on the previous show, I love those picks where you can have 2 first-round talents, at the back half of the draft. And yet when you're looking here, there's a decent chance to get Cooper Kupp, who I think could easily finish as the overall top player in fantasy this season. Obviously, you're not going to get Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase there. Cap, Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey. I mean, obviously to draft ZeroRB, we've got to go with Hill. But in a vacuum, what pick do you like if it comes down to those guys?
Between the two, I prefer either. McCaffrey's such a big talent with probably by far the biggest ceiling as a running back. I like Cooper Kupp the most out of those 3. I love that Week 17 game. I think that, first of all, the Giants secondary, we saw what they did for me when the Eagles played them Week 14. They're not a good defense, although they did get that one cornerback. Cooper Kupp is my favorite here. And I like getting some later pieces like a Jalen Hyatt or, anybody.
So you mentioned Jalen Hyatt. We have a lot of Wandale, and the issue there, obviously, is injury. He seems to me like the pretty clear top receiver on their team if he can play. The other thing, though, Blair Andrews has written some great pieces on Jalen Hyatt. We had Hyatt ranked, above most sites during prospect season. Still tried to add him quite a bit in Dynasty. Are you pushed off of him at all by sort of the offseason puff pieces featuring other pieces of this New York Giants passing game?
No, I'm not. And he actually had a huge week for me in DFS in college, but no, I'm big on Jalen Hyatt. They also traded up to get him. It was Dayball's first trade up. I'm huge on Jalen Hyatt, and I prefer that this random piece of one day working with the third team. You get him much cheaper, pretty much free. We don't need him to go off into the playoffs. We honestly prefer that doesn't happen, so we get low advance rate Hyatt. I'm very big on Jalen Hyatt, and I'm happy to hear that you guys were too.
It's going to be interesting to see now as these camps start and as reports start coming out with either injuries, players getting negative buzz in those camp reports, how quickly they drop in these drafts. And then when you're in a draft, if it's currently that they're in a situation where, maybe they're a 14th round ADP, are we waiting at all? Are we taking them at the same ADP? Are we trying to get them in the 16th? It's going to be interesting to see that happening with the volume of drafts going through here at Underdog. How do you feel about that, Shawn?
Yeah, I'm excited about the news. I'm excited about the values, and you kind of hope that your guys get just enough buzz that you can feel comfortable, but not so much that it really starts to move their ADPs. One of the things that Cap mentioned in the previous show that I thought was a great note is that sometimes you can get scared off a little bit if a guy is now rising, one round maybe ahead of where you really wanted to take him. Now, you want to be aware of value. You also want to be aware of what your exposures were. We tend to draft really high exposures of those guys early, and then we can let that exposure balance out once they've risen. But Cap, I thought that was a great note. Are there guys yet who already kind of fit into that category for you?
Well, Sky Moore, definitely. He's risen about a round, and I still take him. All the wide receivers, really, although those people rose from May, so I'm not too concerned. But Sky Moore is definitely that kind of player. Jerome Ford, I'm pretty big on the the Browns running attack. They were first in explosive run rate. So I'm not concerned that Jerome Ford rose a lot. But yeah, Sky Moore definitely fits that build for me. What about you?
Moore is one I'm still taking. Elijah Moore. I mean, those second-year guys, I think, can rise. We'll have some of the ZeroRB targets who can move up a little bit. We have this, you mentioned the Week 17 game, the Week 16 game with the Saints, also a little bit interesting once you have Kupp. And just for listeners who couldn't tell, we did get Kupp falling to us at the 104. So we were able to get Kupp, keep the ZeroRB train rolling. We didn't have to move for McCaffrey there or take the slight consolation prize of Tyreek Hill. I say that Hill could finish as the easy top player. I was going to mention Olave has that Week 16 game, but he does go one spot ahead of us here. It's looking like T. Higgins or Devontae Smith. Cap, which direction should we go?
I mean, I prefer Devontae Smith. You have the pedigree of being huge on Devontae Smith last year. I will say about Olave is I'm pretty wary of the Saints. I think Dennis Allen's a terrible coach. So I would bump all the Saints down a bit. But Olave definitely could be in for a massive year with a bit of a QB upgrade. But I'm very wary of taking any Saints, especially the running backs, because Kamara was in a committee with the injured Mark Ingram. Now you add 2 fresh people to the backfield. I'm very wary of taking a Saint.
We are 2 selections away, and we're in a situation now where the kind of top players on the board would be mainly running backs here, Stevenson, Gibbs. Jalen Hurts is an option that would potentially be available. We haven't gone as much elite quarterback at that end of the elite quarterback scale recently, but with having Devontae Smith there might come into play. What are your thoughts here? Who would your preferred option? We're going to let you make the tiebreakers here, Cap, because
I appreciate that. I mean, I want your guys' input too. My pick here would either be Hurts or Debo. I mean, maybe we go Debo and then wait for Fields because we were talking up Fields.
Yeah, I think it could be interesting to go that way here in this draft, the way things are rolling so far. Shawn, myself and yourself haven't drafted on our co-managed drafts anyway, much Debo Samuel. Is Samuel somebody who you're optimistic about in 2023? Obviously, when we were drafting in 2022 last year, the price really was screaming up to a very, very high level. Still in the mid-third round, we take him here at the 304. How's your feelings here on Debo?
Yeah, in the sort of perfect draft articles, or the articles, the Underdog Workshop, I should say, we're going through the different structures that you can use. We're going through what the Roster Construction Explorer tells us about how these work and how different structures work together, what you need to do to make different draft attacks come through for you, because obviously what you draft early is going to have a big impact on how you want to move as you go through it. But Debo Samuel has been a consistent target in those. I've started to refer to him as the most undervalued player in fantasy. And so taking him 6 spots ahead of ADP here is definitely not something that I'm worried about at all.
I think Cap has a smile on his face hearing that after making the call on it. Shawn, if we put up the draft board, I'm interested to see Hurts does go with the 308. I do believe that may be the AJ Brown drafter who, at this particular point in the draft, gets him 7 picks. It isn't actually. The AJ Brown drafter also passed on Hurts, which is quite interesting. I know we were talking about the uniqueness of certain rosters, but I think if you were doing it from that pick, there probably isn't that many Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown rosters with a Saquon Barkley mixed in between. So that's strange. We both passed over on him. So we'll see if we get back and maybe we link into Hurts a little bit later. Myself and Shawn on there goes Fields as well at the 402. So that's not happening. A little bit earlier than he has been going in drafts, usually in the 5th round. We have been talking on some of our recent shows, some of our post shows when we're finished, about the tight end landscape and how to approach that. This all stemmed from a TJ Hawkinson draft we did last week. How are you feeling about the tight end position? Are you happy to wait on those guys, I guess, from the Greg Dulcich level onwards in the double-digit rounds, or are you trying to get one of those elite guys, and have you any preference for your targets?
I'm trying to get an elite guy, especially Pitts. I like Waller too. Waller would fit in this build, but because, we're doing one draft and we're trying to get my spice in it, I would definitely take Pitts. I'm pretty low on Judy too, because I think they're not going to be passing too much. I'm seeing him in the queue, but yeah.
We're going to have to kick him off the show, Shawn, now. Is that okay?
No. This is the perfect draft, and it's
gonna be fun. So we are one selection away. With the names that are in the queue, we have Godwin, Judy, Kenneth Walker, Hopkins, Waller, Pitts. Any of those standing out at our current pick? We're going to be picking here at pick 45. Those guys kind of ADPs ranging, between 40 and all the way down to kind of 70 at this point.
Well, Watson and London are the targets for me, but I don't want to. You guys seem to be low on those two, so.
You can do the tiebreakers here. We have 18 seconds left to go.
We're gonna hit some Christian Watson. That'll be perfect for Colm. He gets his Green Bay player in there. We get Green Bay at a 4-pick discount. We have the 4 wide receivers to start. We're getting set up for these tight end selections. It's looking very, very good. What's the argument for Watson at price versus Romeo Doubs at price in a passing game where there might be some question about the QB? Jordan Love has generated rave reviews. Are you buying that the Packers are going to be able to support some explosive fantasy wide receivers?
I'm going to try and add one more thing to that. Does it have to be one versus the other at price? Can it be the two of them with Jordan Love?
Yeah, I'm down to do both. I think it's an undervalued offense where Jordan Love, follow the trend. They had Favre and then they had Rodgers. Now they have Love. I think that, there's uncertainty there, and that's something I like to target in best ball especially. So I think I love the Packers this year. That's a division we like with the Lions, the Bears. I'm down to go either Ayuk or JSN here, get JSN and then plan on Pitts. But I'm definitely down for anyone here. And then I'll talk a bit about Watson.
You like JSN over Godwin, yeah?
JSN, yeah. And then we can get Pitts on the return because JSN's not falling to us. And this is, a Siegele draft. We both love JSN.
Shawn, were you thinking there about stacking up the 49ers? I see you had Ayuk at the top of the list, even over Godwin there.
Well, we could put more of that together. I think that I probably prefer to do Debo with Dotson and create the path to both of those quarterbacks late, especially after we decided to go with passing on.
We have created the path, though, to Jordan Love, as we discussed there. That was why we did Christian Watson.
I haven't been as excited about the path to Jordan Love because you got some passing questions and he doesn't actually run. And so that part for me, from a fantasy perspective, is a little bit tricky. But if Cap is telling us to do Jordan Love late, then again, we're going to do that. So I don't have any issue there. I'm excited for the possibility of Pitts coming back to us. And then obviously we have these possibilities also with Dotson.
Yeah.
With
maybe we get Swift and pair him up with because I don't really like taking 6 wide receivers in a row. I do like Dotson. Maybe we push him for Samuel. But Love came in randomly against the Eagles. He was not expecting to play. And he played only like 11 plays, but he played well during those 11 plays. I definitely think he's a value. He might not pan out, but when you're trying to buy uncertainty because the range of outcomes can be massive and they're very cheap.
And so we've been really leaning into late QB this season. And the question here with Howell is, will he get benched? If he doesn't get benched, he's going to be a top 10 quarterback. And so I don't see how you can't have extreme exposure there. Brock Purdy is going to run one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. Desmond Ridder has both Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and he has a little bit of rushing ability. I think he's going to add some points with his legs. Cap, when you look at those profiles versus the history of late QBs in best ball, which has been catastrophically bad, how are you balancing those two elements?
I'd definitely like to get an elite quarterback like Fields or potential one in Richardson or Danny Dimes, but I'm fine pushing it. There's always one or two. Like Joe Burrow was going really late 2 years ago. Josh Allen was going really late 3 years ago. Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence were going late last year. So I think there's always one or two quarterbacks that hit. The chances of one of those dudes hitting is low, but I think one of them will hit. So
we are coming up in 2 picks time. Pitts has gone in that meantime. So we have a situation here where we have a lot of options available to us over our next 2 selections. So we have DeAndre Swift in the queue, Darren Waller, Dotson, Pickens, Goddard, Burks. All those guys go in kind of a 10 pick range here. We have started off with 5 running backs. You mentioned you mightn't want to go with 5 wide receivers, sorry. Not go for the sick, but we're coming up here in our pick. Is there any names there that are really stand out? Dotson was the one I was going to pitch to take that a little bit earlier before the turn, but he does go. Anyone here standing out for you in this queue?
Yeah, I think we go Swift and then Waller. I mean, Swift was a 1-2 turn pick last year. We saw what the Eagles running back did for my team. I mean, Eagles running backs are just a total smash because they're going to put up a ton of points in the first half and then they're going to run the ball. We get a huge talent in Swift. And why are the Eagles running backs so cheap? So I'm predicting that the Eagles running back will be on the regular season team again. I don't know what you guys feel about that.
Have you a strong preference for Swift over Penny, or are you happy to take either one?
I do have a strong preference for Swift over Penny, especially at this part of the draft season. Maybe Penny could rise if it's like confirmed he's going to get a big workload, but I see more risk with Penny right now, and I see Swift as a huge value, although I like to get them both as well.
And when we are up here in 2 picks again, Waller is an option. The other tight end that would be in this range is Dallas Goedert, with Trevor Lawrence as a potential quarterback option. George Pickens is there as well. Waller with that week 17 correlation with Cooper Kupp. Is that your strong preference here as well?
I was going to say Waller or Goddard. I do believe that elite
Goddard did go, yeah.
Yeah, Goddard went. So I'm thinking Waller. What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, the only other consideration would be Pickens opposite JSN and creating that week 17 play. Yeah, let's go with Waller here. I wanted to ask you about Goddard with Smith without the QB. Do you like to put 2 members of the passing game together there and bet on that offense? We also already have a running back from that team. You like betting in that direction even without the QB?
Yeah, I do. I think that's like one of the most prolific offenses in the league, and Hurts can put up, a major week, but I think other quarterbacks can somewhat match him. So I love getting pieces of that offense. The concern there is that they're up so much in the division that come week 17 that they don't need their guys. But I think the Giants will improve this year. We already saw a massive improvement from the Giants when it comes to red zone success last year, like a 25% boost to 5th most in the league. And actually the Bills fell in red zone success rate. So you see the effect of Dayball there. I think another year in that offense, the Giants are a great offense to target. So I think that division will be more competitive. I love getting Eagles players. What about you guys?
I think you're spot on with the, them being an offense to absolutely target. I think it gets a little bit tricky with the guys going in the first 2 rounds. Obviously, we usually see within 3.5 rounds, the quarterback and the 2 wide receivers going. And I think that can make it challenging if you're trying to pay up at that end. But I think adding these pieces as you go through, and that's one of the reasons why I like Penny as well. If it's a case that you're picking and you skip on Swift there, or Swift goes when you're then in the 9th or 10th round, if you have the option then to get Penny, I think, again, it's going to be a high-scoring offense. We have seen Swift have some injury issues. So I'm kind of drafting both of those guys, and there's a couple of running or backfields that I'm doing that with this year. So I'm happy to get either or. And I think both myself and Shawn, we have soft spots for Penny. Penny's issue has always been staying healthy, but when he has been healthy, he has been very good. So I like, again, like you're saying, targeting that offense and getting those options. Shawn, the other question I had for you, Cap, was on that last pick, we take DeAndre Swift. Dotson went 2 picks ahead. That's a decision usually that I find very tough, where I probably lean Dotson and then I'm coming back later to try and get Penny in that situation. Would you be going Swift there over all the players that went in that range? So we have Miles Sanders, Dotson, Pierce, Swift, Lockett, Cam Akers, Jordan Addison.
Well, I'd definitely go Pitts if he was there, but I wouldn't go Dotson there because we already have 5 wide receivers. But I was going to suggest Dotson there because, we're drafting with Siegele. So, I would have gone Dotson there for the vibes, but I don't like going 6 straight wide receivers. I'd rather go Swift or Pitts. I think Swift is a massive value. The other reason why I don't get to Penny is because A-Chain goes in that range, and I do believe A-Chain is going to rise like 4 rounds minimum. I think the gap between him and Gibbs is way too far. So
he's somebody we're going to have to start, Shawn, to add into a queue here coming up to make sure we have an option to get him. You mentioned not wanting to go 6 straight wide receivers. Is that you're wanting to have at least one running back, say, through 8 rounds, for example? Is it like you don't mind having a 5 wide receiver, elite tight end, elite quarterback through those 7 rounds, or is there?
Exactly. I don't care about pushing running back. I was thinking we push running back as far as possible for the name of RotoViz and the ZeroRB, but I don't care about getting.
I think this fits into a ZeroRB build, what we've done so far. So we'll see how the rest of it plays out. But it's just interesting what the team we've set up. But I do think Swift is one of the first running backs I'm really in that range looking to potentially take a detour for. So we have added H into the queue. He is somebody who will be going maybe in another round's time. We're making that 3rd selection from this point in time. Shawn has added Javonte Williams, Bateman to the queue as well. Any other players in this range that go, or is there any of those players that you're not interested in?
Well, no. I mean, I think Javonte is a major smash. I think, but we do see Watson fall. But I love Javante's a smash. I noticed you have James Cook very high in your rankings. I love James Cook too. I think he's very talented. How do you feel about him versus Damian Harris, Shawn?
I just think you have to bet on the guy that they drafted, the guy who has the speed, the guy who has the breakout potential. I get these plays wrong from time to time. You obviously will, but you just have to be loaded up on that type of option as you go through your drafts, especially at that price. To get the guy that the Bills are betting on at those prices, I mean, I realize the Buffalo Bills have not been great for running backs, but you're talking about potentially the best offense in the NFL. That price doesn't make any sense to me. And so I have a lot of that. It's really exciting to hear all of this talk about DeAndre Swift. He's my version at running back. I said that Deebo Samuel is the most undervalued player in drafts. DeAndre Swift is the most undervalued running back. He's my highest rostered running back. It's great to get the King Cap seal of approval there. Where should we go here? This is a little bit of a flatter area where ADP suggests that we're going to be right in the range to get A-Chain coming back, but we don't have to risk it if we don't have somebody else.
We take it. If we have Cap talking it up, I think we take him. What do you think, Cap? I don't want to take Sean Watson anyway. I don't know what.
Is Richardson available or no? Just Watson.
You want Richardson?
Richardson or Danny Dimes?
So I have selected Richardson a couple times when he has been a good round and a half below ADP.
And is that because you love the late round QBs?
In part it is. In part, I also think that Richardson is going to not play that much this year. And so, or at least there's that risk. And so at this price, I also think it's almost exclusively a rushing path. And so even then, I mean, you've got to have something to augment that a little bit. So you mentioned a couple of running quarterbacks in this range. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on some of those names because the hybrid quarterbacks have, a path to more production. And yet, one of the things that I did in a recent article was look at the rushing quarterbacks in year one. Their performance wasn't anything special. And most of those guys were priced more effectively than Richardson. Do you really want to get a rushing QB if you don't get a hybrid QB? I mean, if you don't get an elite QB?
Definitely. And I think they're valued. The reason I like Richardson is no specifics. Just I feel like his range of outcomes is really wide. And I said earlier, I like to target uncertainty. So that's why I like Richardson. I have no data or take to back it up. I just go for players that have huge range of outcomes and could have a massive ceiling compared to ADP. But I'm definitely
that's why we want to draft with you on like every team, because Colm and I are just like, what's the riskiest player at this draft slot? Yep, that's our guy. So perfect, absolutely perfect.
I do think for obviously the talk up of A-Chain obviously earlier in the draft, and then he's in a zone there where he may have got back to us, but he may not. But I do think with the wide receivers that we built up there through the opening 5 rounds, then obviously we get Darren Waller. To have Swift, Williams, and A-Chain with those 3 running backs through our 9 selections at this point. I think that that's as strong with the wide receiver core to have those running backs with an elite tight end that we could possibly have done at this point in time. The key
and
here
I prefer to have Jones with Waller and playing off of Kupp than I would Richardson. And I mean, even though by ADP doesn't quite come back to us, one of the things, Cap, that I've had a lot of success with this year is setting up teams with multiple pathways and then taking quarterbacks actually at like a full round discount as opposed to paying a full round premium, as I know some drafters like to do to make sure they lock in their stacks. What has your experience been drafting QBs?
Well, I found the rooms to be very casual this summer. So I find that quarterbacks get sniped often. I like the idea. I've never really thought of that. And yeah, Danny Dimes falls right into our pocket and we guaranteed. And I love the idea of getting either, Dobbs to come back to us, or we could go Elijah Mitchell with Debo. But I love getting Dobbs. I mean, this is a classic Shawn pick right here. So, but yeah, I mean, I see my quarterbacks getting sniped often. I find these rooms to be very casual. But
it seems to be happening more and more frequent, and even some of the YouTube videos that I've posted over the last couple of weeks of the drafts that we've done, people have been saying that in their experiences it's happening more and more where they're just getting sniped on a quarterback when they have set up kind of the stack throughout the draft, and then they're going that little bit earlier, like we've seen here. In this case, it was that us and the other drafter of AJ Brown passed on Hurts, but we're seeing it happen the opposite way, where maybe somebody has a Tyreek or a Waddle and obviously they're hoping to get Tua, or somebody's hoping to get Kirk Cousins, for example, and they're happening that way. The interesting thing that could possibly set up here, though, with the way Shawn has talked about, trying to pick those players and then have potential other paths, if it is a case here that we would see Dobbs lasting us 2 more picks, you could potentially have a team that is then set up from that Packers side. That mightn't be something that Shawn wants to do, but it gives you some interesting options. But also with the Giants now with Waller and Jones, that's going to lead to some of those later round slot receivers, let's call them, for the Giants. There's like 72 of them at this point that you can pick to add into that Giant side of things.
Yeah.
Dobbs makes it back to us. There is some other options here. Myers is there, Dalton Kincaid, Cole Kmet, and on Dobbs here.
Yeah, let's go Dobbs. I saw
this
you
feels like a pure pick to just like we've set a bet up here for Shawn earlier in the draft where he said pick one or the other at price, and we've drafted both of them. Watson 5 picks after ADP, but we've both of them now. Shawn, how do you feel about a complete Green Bay stack here with adding Love as your second quarterback here? Do you love that?
I love it. I mean, you're going to be decked out in your Packers gear all season, and I can't give you a hard time about Aaron Rodgers.
I actually have paid Cap when he's coming on
so.
here. I've paid him to come on and exclusively draft it. That's the whole point of this, has been to draft a Packers team, because I don't want to put that across when I'm drafting. So it's working out well.
Cap, you mentioned not wanting to take too many receivers or the 6 wide receivers to start. Where do you like then to come back through and pick up those next guys?
Yeah, I like this range. I like this range a lot. I like Shaheed. I like obviously Hyatt, John Mechie, but I like this range right here too, with Dobbs, with Mooney, some other players I'm forgetting, but I don't like Mooney or Kmet without Fields. I said that earlier. Like, I just think if they go crazy in the playoffs, like, Fields is going to go absolutely nuclear. I saw Herbert was put up in the queue, and I think Roschon's the better talent. So I've been really taking Roschon and really passing up on Herbert. But yeah, I like Dobbs a lot. I like Sky Moore.
With somebody like a Waller, you mentioned you want to get that elite tight end. Are you looking then to wait quite a bit on tight end? Are you looking to set it up for a 2 tight end build, or are you mainly going 3 tight ends with maybe an early and 2 lates, or how are you?
I like going 2 tight ends, but actually 3 tight ends by Leone was shown to be a bit more EV. But I've really gotten onto Greg Dulcich of late, thanks to Shawn. So I like to go Waller Dulcich, but obviously I think Dulcich is gone here.
Dulcich is gone, yeah. Blair Andrews had a great article last week looking at some of the options, kind of from Dulcich downwards, 7 potential targets, and Dulcich really some interesting stats in that for him for last season. But you're getting into the Sam Laporta range. Dulcich did go in the middle of the 11th at the 11:08. So there's a few other very interesting names, but I feel like you mentioned Dulcich. I think once you go past him, probably Laporta, and with it being a rookie tight end, makes it a little bit questionable. He's probably the last one that I'm kind of sitting at 2. But I feel like once you're into this range, you're probably looking at a 3 tight end build unless you have 2 tight ends in that kind of first 10 rounds. I find after Fairmouth, you're kind of starting to get a little bit dicey at the second tight end.
And how do you feel about that, Shawn?
I really like 3 tight end. The roster construction explorer, the lessons that we put out, I mean, they're very heavy onto 3 tight end in this format. And it's one of the reasons why I think that you can wait. But even when you get one of the guys who is an impact player, the 3 tight end, just it gives you, especially at this time of draft season, it allows you to not make those throwaway picks because you've got very good tight ends who go in rounds 17 and 18. And so as opposed to forcing a correlation receiver who is just not going to score any points and is going to hurt your chances to get through even that first section. I mean, we want to win. I mean, this draft is to win the regular season, right? We're trying to do that. We're obviously also setting it up for the playoffs, but even teams that don't do what Cap's team did last year and win the regular season, they still have to get out of their leagues. And I think that not making throwaway picks is a big part of that. The roster construction explorer supports 3 tight end. 3 tight end is great for this season. Cap, when we're looking at this next pick here, you mentioned Roschon, got a lot of him. Jaylen Warren is pretty trendy. If he makes it one more pick, he'll be below ADP, which I don't necessarily see a lot with him as a riser. You mentioned you were out on Miller, which I certainly think is fine, especially with him being the third string guy who is injured. Do you have other ways that you want to look at playing this?
I think we go Warren past it. He might get sniped right here. I like Warren a lot with the JSN. I also like Algier a ton. Roschon sometimes make it back. I love Roschon, but I like Algier a lot too. But I think we go Warren here for the week 17. What do you guys think?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I love Warren there. I mean, I don't want to set up a play that is just completely fading Najee Harris, but when we're looking at ZeroRB and the way it's worked historically, and one of the reasons why it works is you do get these setups where the starter is overrated and people feel like because of a draft situation, because of what he has done from a workload perspective in the past, that he's locked in, that he has this very wide moat when in fact the opposite is the case. It's not to say that Najee couldn't bounce back and have a Josh Jacobs type of season. I mean, there are reasons to believe obviously that Jacobs is much more talented. Some of those do obviously stem from what he did last year though, which Najee Harris owners will tell you that, I mean, you got to still wait for that. But we have a lot of reasons to believe that there are some talent issues there. And then the backup showed a lot last season. His explosiveness, yards before contact, yards after contact, those types of things. If that offense does lean really heavily into the run, which I hope it doesn't, because I'm pretty heavily invested in their passing game as well, but Warren becomes just a complete no-brainer pick. Algier is fun. The only problem that I have with Algier is that I have a lot of Algier in Dynasty, so there was a disappointment element when they added Bijan. But I have a lot of Bijan now in all formats. It's hard to emotionally deal with the idea that he could get hurt. But obviously he could. And if he does, Algier is going to score a ton of points. It does seem like those are the 2 guys for this pick. Is that where everybody's at?
Yeah. And then we hope Love makes it back. He probably will. We have both passed.
He should. He really should. But we have seen that parent. But he is somebody who we're looking at that next selection. So, I think we're probably looking here at a running back, and then we're probably holding off quite a bit on running back. I know we love Chuba Hubbard, but might be one of our final selections here. Johnson, the way you want to go?
Yeah, I definitely do, especially because we both love Bijan. Shawn loves Bijan, and let's draft this if Bijan doesn't get hurt. I do think that Algier is probably the best handcuff in the draft, and it's funny that he goes way past Mitchell. I guess that's because maybe Mitchell goes off with CMC healthy, but Algier seems like a total smash in ZeroRB teams.
I think as well, part of that is obviously we're hoping that we see Atlanta take a step forward and that offense improve, and the young players rising up together. But if you're looking at which offense you expect to score more points this season, there's no doubt that people would have a lot more belief in Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers offense to do that versus what we're going to see in Atlanta. So you mentioned there's a chance that he goes off even if CMC's healthy. There's also more of a chance that he goes off a lot more because the offense is a lot better if something happens to CMC. The one pick I want to call out here is at 140. That is the 1208. We see Justin Ross go off the board, one pick after Rashee Rice. So I did get a pop-up on my phone today, maybe about 2 hours ago, that some positive news around Ross. We did joke about it on the show that we recorded at the same time. So I'm talking about this. This is Sunday. You're listening to this on Wednesday. Those puff pieces, that news can really affect some ADP. Justin Ross prior to this was going undrafted. How are you feeling about that, Shawn?
And I do think that, I mean, Justin Ross is one of my 5 wide receivers to target late when you get kind of locked out.
In the 12th round?
Well, late 12th round is not late yet here. When you get locked out, when you have wide receiver avalanche drafts, obviously Peter Overzet and I doing the best ball banana stand get avalanched every week. So we have to have contingencies in place. I do kind of think that was a timeout right there. And so their queue, I mean, you get in spots where maybe your queue is to remind you of somebody for later. And then if you time out, you get the guy in your queue. So it could have been a little bit of that element. Man, if Justin Ross is who he was as a freshman in college, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to go even more scorched earth than usual, which obviously I would be a fan of. So we'll see.
Laporta did go there. He was somebody I was hoping was going to get back to us. We talked about Love as a potential option coming back to us here. This will be right around where his ADP is. Cole Kmet was somebody you said, though, that you didn't really want, but at this point, he is, if he makes it to us, going to be, well, he goes off the board. I was going to say it's going to be 14 picks after ADP. Certainly would have kind of come into play there. Sam Laporta did go at the 14-4, so that's him out here for us, who would have been a prime target for me anyway. We are one selection away. Who are you wanting to get Jordan Love on this roster? Or the other player I mentioned was Chuba Hubbard, but we now have 5 running backs. We have 6 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 quarterback. Normally, I'd be screaming to get Hubbard here, but this feels like a place to get Jordan Love and see what comes back. Yeah,
I mean, I like Jordan Love here a lot. I know we all do. You guys,
well, wait, except for Shawn.
This is in terms of potentially passing it, and we don't really have another player we want to pass it for, so we won't pass it. But we also have Matthew Stafford sitting here below ADP.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down to go both. I mean, I think we need Love with the double stack, and I'm thinking we get Musgrave as well as one of our late tight ends. Just get a fully clothed Jordan Love, which I love as a strategy. Unfortunately, we don't have Dylan or Aaron Jones.
I haven't heard the phrase fully. Maybe I'm missing out here. I haven't heard the phrase fully clothed before rather than naked, so fully clothed. Shawn made an interesting point. For people watching, and Shawn, I'm going to ask this question because people might be wondering. I assume that we are drafting and the ADPs and the rankings that are showing up here is your rankings have been updated into the site. Is that why we're seeing some of those? Like, for example, there we had we're on the board now. We'll answer that question after.
Cap, where are you on Spears?
I mean, I really like Spears. I mentioned on Corain's show that I know his cousin, and I actually do. And I'm here. Whatever I hear from him,
it's on the grind
about Derrick Henry.
So we're going Spears here.
Yeah, I'm down to go Spears. The thing is, I like
running backs here, guys. But
I really like Puka Nacua. I really like Jalen Hyatt, and we could go 8 wide receivers there. It's probably not smart, so maybe we just go Hyatt. But I really like that Rams Giants game, Week 17. If we want to get a Rams spring back, either Puka. I know Shawn loves Tutu, and Zach Evans is also a good pick. But that would put us at 8 wide receivers if we went 2 more, which seems a bit extra. Although we really do have elite running backs on this team.
Yeah, the running backs for me looking at these, we are pretty loaded at the running back position with a lot of the targets that we would want to have. There will be some options for us here moving forward, potentially at wide receiver with Wendell Robinson, Hyatt, some other options as well coming in late. And it depends on how you're trying to stack these teams up. The Giants do offer that option to stack up late. We've talked about that a little bit with the Patriots as well, for example. So that opens up the door to some wide receiver options for correlation that we might want. But yeah, it's turning out to be a team that I really, really do like. But Shawn, I was asking that question on the rankings that's showing up. Obviously, they're in a slightly different order than people might be used to in Underdog. You have uploaded your rankings to the site.
Yes, these are my rankings. They're actually blended rankings from myself and Michael Dubner, who is a fantastic best ball guru. Make sure you check out his work on the site. Make sure you check out his tool for tracking your teams. It will really revolutionize for you kind of what you're seeing there. helping with your preparation. So those are the rankings. I love the way this team is set up, right? We got the wide receivers early. We have that 0-RB start. And yet, as Kat mentioned, the running back firepower, I think, is pretty elite. We have Swift, Javonte Williams, Devin Achane, Jalen Warren, Roshan Johnson, and Tyjae Spears. I mean, that's the perfect roster for me in terms of how you build out running backs once you've waited through the beginning. And even despite such a good setup at both running back and wide receiver, we have Darren Waller there as a potentially elite tight end. That part of it is perfect. So we have 3 picks left, and we can really go a lot of different directions from a structural perspective. Probably 2 of the picks should be tight ends, and we could add a late QB if we want. Now, we had mentioned Matthew Stafford. He did actually go in the interim.
I was going to ask you, Shawn, on that. You mentioned, obviously, we have the Week 17, basically both teams facing off against each other in Week 17 with the Giants side and the Rams side. Would you rather have gone there with the option to take Stafford?
No, I think we're leaning into Green Bay. And I love the talent on Christian Watson. I think that it's a little bit of a risky way to play it with Love. I think with Romeo Doubs, you get a less risky way to play it, but both guys could blow up, and that's what we bet on. This team is perfect that way. Trey McBride would give us a tight end opposite Devontae Smith, and then we could go for Musgrave. We could also take one of these receivers that you mentioned. Cap, do you like McBride here or Hyatt here?
I think we go Musgrave and then push McBride, talk about whether we want 2 pieces of this Giants game. Because I really think that the Giants...
Okay, I'll let you break it, but I would take McBride over Musgrave even with the tiebreaker. Okay. I hope we get McBride back here.
Okay.
I don't ever get too worried about taking about McBride. I mean, I've got a lot of him. He's my most rostered tight end. A lot of that came from the first... Well, a lot of that came before I felt like there was a pretty good chance they were going to throw out a late round rookie to play the first half of the season at QB. So, that part of it is a little bit tricky. But no, we have Musgrave, so that's perfect. We have that set up. Hyatt.
I forgot.
McBride did go. Okay. So we have Hyatt here. We have Mayer. So let's look at these tight ends.
Fant would be a potential option as well.
Henry is somebody who is just wildly undervalued.
Henry, now the one thing with Henry, we have seen in a good few drafts him go undrafted, so we could potentially try and get him as that last pick.
Yeah, he kind of sets us up for the potential last round. I get the strong feeling, Cap, that you're wanting Hyatt here, which, I can't imagine a much more fun pick than that.
Yeah, he's the Blitnikoff winner. He had a massive breakout. I really don't get the hate. I think he has a massive week-to-week ceiling. Real speed demon. So I go Hyatt here. I'm surprised you guys really stressed 3 tight ends. I apologize for getting Musgrave over McBride, but
I think it's going to be hilarious because Musgrave's going to end up being the person now that wins us all the money, and I'll have to re-release this podcast after the fact, and people will be like, "That guy's an idiot." So, but yeah, no,
you can never get locked out at tight end because you have Hunter Henry in the. Like you said, Hunter Henry doesn't go drafted, and
there's a chance Mayer last back too. There's a chance all these guys are tight end last back. We do see from different drafts in different orders.
Cap, you had mentioned taking the really wide range of outcomes players. That's what Colm and I have been preaching for, I'm going to say decades, but the show is not that old. For a while.
The article now, Shawn, is 1 decade old almost 10 years.
The ZeroRB article is. So we're getting closer to the decades thing with that. You obviously will take that with Musgrave. Or I was going to say, when you're looking at wide range of outcomes, does that include rookie tight ends for you? I'm guessing because we took Musgrave that it does. Do you feel comfortable going with 2 rookie tight ends, or is your preference for Henry or Fant to come back around, or do you have another name you want us to look at as well?
No, I'm down for Mayer. I didn't realize we had Cooper Kupp, so I'm less pressed to get Puka or Tutu. I like the tight end class this year, so I think it's a good year to bust that narrative. Musgrave seems like he's locked into tight end 1 role.
He does from the reporting. It does seem to be. It's a case of, I guess, as optimistic as I want to be as a Packers fan, and I guess part of the way of drafting this roster, you're looking at range of outcomes. The best range of outcomes is the Packers are good enough to go on and win a division this year, which means, these wide receivers and this tight end, along with the young quarterback, are doing very well. And then this team obviously is going to do very well as a result. So I just haven't, that's the first time I've drafted Luke Musgrave outside of Dynasty all season. But I do think for this particular roster, if we're going all in with the Packers, I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel really good about the Packers because of who they face. They face the Vikings, they face the Bears, and they face the Lions all season. So even if they don't win those games, I mean, they're going to be facing, porous defenses with really high-scoring games.
And you would think that the Tampa Bay, Carolina, Minnesota slate in the playoffs could also be very favorable. I'm actually pretty excited about both Godwin and Mike Evans, with Baker Mayfield trying for this last gasp to prove himself. I think they'll throw it around the yard. I don't think that team is going to be awesome, but I think they will need to throw. They have no running back play. You could get that as a week 15 shootout, and then the Panthers, that could be a rising defense, and yet I think that team is going to go as Bryce Young goes. And while I think those Panthers pieces are bad picks for the regular season, you could see him emerging down the stretch and again trying to create that shootout. We are 3 picks away. Both Mayer and Henry are both there. Cap, you've created a perfect draft for us. This is like the $3.5 million draft is what we're going to call it. Who do you like for this last selection?
I like either Fant or Mayer. I think maybe Mayer with the wider range of outcome. We would get Fant with
possibly against the Steelers, yeah. But the Steelers then in week 17.
I think Mayer. He's getting really under noticed. I mean, I thought he was the best tight end in the class. I didn't really know about Musgrave, who's very fast for being 6'5". He's really fast. I think Musgrave is an incredible talent, but I like Mayer a lot. He seems like a Gronk type.
He does. That's the name that always kind of comes up for me when I'm thinking about it. Now, Gronkowski still was more athletic, but one of the things with Mayer is that in addition to the kind of timed athleticism, is that he doesn't look athletic in his highlights. And so I think that it's very easy to think, okay, well, this is like just a guy. And then you look at the numbers and you look at some of the highlight catches where he's out there somewhat covered, and yet the quarterback forces it to him because he trusts him, and then the ball manages to slip through. Mayer makes a one-handed catch that seems impossible and then drags the guy. I mean, you're talking about, again, someone with incredible production coming out of college who could just flat out be a star right away. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I think that you are pressed to do 2 tight end in most drafts, and I think that late tight end is so effective, at least right now. Mayer in round 18 makes absolutely no sense to me. I love that we were able to add him as the last piece to this draft. So we've made it through all 18 picks. We were able to get ZeroRB as we wanted. We start with the 5 wide receivers. There were Cooper Kupp, Devontae Smith, Deebo Samuel, Christian Watson, and Jackson Smith in Jigba. We're able to get Romeo Doubs in round 11 and Jalen Hyatt in round 17. That was really the cherry on top of this draft. That part I think went really well. We were able to get Darren Waller, so we have an elite tight end for the playoff portion. And then, we're taking a little bit of injury risk with DeAndre Swift and Javonte Williams, but 2 of the, what would you say, Cap? Are they 2 of the 10 most talented running backs in the NFL, 2 of the 7 most talented? Why are they available at this part of drafts?
I mean, people are just afraid of week 1, I think, and just afraid of injury risk, and that's something we're buying into here. I mean, I think they're both very talented. And I always tell my friend Javonte Williams is a play of modern science. Like, modern science, you got to just trust the science here, and that Javonte will be back to full strength. This running back room is absolutely nasty, and I do believe A-Chain will be going around where Swift is going, or Rashad White. So I really think this team has a potential to vie for the regular season prize.
And there's obviously a potential with those 3 guys that, injuries, with A-Chain we don't know yet, but with Swift and Williams, that injuries do play their part this year and they don't achieve what we think they're going to achieve. But those 3 running backs and those 3 offenses heading into 2024, I keep mentioning Shawn and Ben when they do their drafting, basically the future year's first 2 rounds. I don't think they might get into the first 2 rounds, but from where they are now, I think those guys will all be top 4 round picks next year. I think that's not really been that bold. I think if you're being bold, you say they'll be in the, in the second, third round range.
Yeah, and I think that Javonte Williams, another reason why I love to target him, besides the fact that he's potentially massively undervalued, which Shawn alluded to, is that Sean Payton's going to be running the ball like crazy. He was on quote saying that Russell Wilson, he's not going to rely on him too heavily. He's only going to need him 8 to 10 times a game. I think the running backs for the Broncos are going to be absolute smashes, like real smashes.
Question on that for you. You did mention that you were a bit out on Jerry Jeudy. Is that part of the fear with Jeudy, that they're just not going to pass enough?
Yeah, that's the fear there. And I mean, that reception guy, he's been spreading a bit of FUD about Jerry Jeudy not being a good route runner, but I don't buy into that. It's mostly about not targeting the Broncos, and that I love Drake London in that range. I think Drake London's a first round talent, and as well as Christian Watson, who I kind of see as this year's Amon-Ra St. Brown.
How are you feeling, Shawn, as we look at this roster? I think out of all we've done quite a few drafts so far. I think this one is a lot of fun, but has a huge amount of upside. And that might be just me being biased with some Packers added into this one, but I'm excited with this roster.
Yeah, when you have that Cooper Kupp play, and it's really awesome to have Cap on and talking about some of his favorite games to go after. Yeah. To be looking at this game with Kupp and then coming back and having a Daniel Jones team. I don't have a ton of those. We have Jalen Hyatt, who is somebody that, because of the logjam there at receiver, because I do think that Isaiah Hodgins is pretty good. And then if you throw in Wan'Dale coming back and being healthy at some point, if you have, and one of the things I don't necessarily buy into, even though I think that he is a fine player when he's healthy, but Paris Campbell in round 14, where he goes here, I think it's really hard to justify that pick, but it does create, more risk for Hyatt. And so I guess I see some of the same risks for this Giants team with Daniel Jones that Cap is talking about with the Broncos, but I'm very comfortable leaning into that as well, especially on certain teams where you have it set up properly. And I like having Daniel Jones with these upgraded weapons, with an elite coaching staff, and you have to be a year early as opposed to, trying to follow these guys up the board. And so if we're saying that last year was Daniel Jones establishing a little bit of the beachhead, one of the things that was kind of interesting when I was looking at the hybrid quarterbacks as rookies is that Jones was the one who actually put together pretty decent win rates for that rookie season, but he's had a hard time consolidating it until last year. He was good, not great and not a super high scorer, but if you look at a guy who could take a realistic next step, who could be, in the previous show, we talked a lot about Justin Fields. The only disappointments we would have in this draft, but we really wanted to get Fields and we really wanted to get Pitts, and both of those guys went well ahead of where they usually go.
They're nowhere close.
Yeah, sometimes that happens. And so you have to have obviously lots of contingency plans. But if you're looking for like the poor man's Justin Fields, then Daniel Jones is perfect for that. And so I love that we were able to set up that play. And then my only question kind of globally would be, do we have enough quarterback firepower to make the rest of it succeed, right? Do we have the quarterback scoring to go with this team that otherwise looks like a potential regular season winner? Obviously, last year Cap had both Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. We're probably not going to get that level of scoring. And yet, if you're going to have a team that looks weak at QB, you want to have it set up properly, which is what we have here. And so I love to hear him say that Christian Watson could be this year's Amon-Ra. We really like Romeo Doubs. He's got the great rapport with Jordan Love. And then we're making that bet with Musgrave in 16 that his athleticism is also going to elevate it. Cap, you talked about the favorable passing environment and scoring environment that we could have in the NFC North. When you have the team set up so nicely through those two quarterbacks, are Daniel Jones and Jordan Love enough just by themselves to feel like you're in the mix for the big prizes?
I mean, no, but it easily could happen, especially with Danny Dimes. And the issue I have with the team is that we don't have the running back on their team, because really we were betting huge on these offenses. And so it's a bit unsettling that we don't have like an A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones, or, one of the backups. I don't really like Saquon this year. I like Eric Gray, but I mean, that's the only concern with the team, really, is that we don't have the running back with these double and triple stacks. But
It's interesting too on that because, Shawn, I would say this team's much more stacked between those two offenses than we would generally have in the drafts that we do together.
It's very concentrated. So I think that part of it works nicely with the QBs. Cap, was there any other considerations in terms of either maybe there's a spot where we can make a different running back pick, or maybe late we take a third QB? In a roster like this, if you don't have the stacked players with them, are guys like a Howell, like a Ritter, who, as I'm looking at it here, it doesn't have the very last pick, but I think went undrafted. Interestingly enough, Baker Mayfield, Trey Lance are selected. So Cap, can you speak to that, but then also kind of give us a sense of, I mean, you mentioned Drake London being this stud pick, and yet I have a hard time selecting him when London and Pitts seem like similar plays, and one addresses a position that, I mean, you could maybe argue even, and I have argued in some ways, that it's easier to address, but yet a position where you have that player in your starting lineup with a monster score that can differentiate you. But I think we agree that, I mean, London and Pitts are massive talents, and they could both hit, and Ritter has the rushing ability as well. I mean, how does he go undrafted in drafts like this? I guess I'm not understanding what drafters are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm taking naked Ritter, but
you're not to that point with him.
No, because I mean the offense is so concentrated, right? If he goes nuclear, then you better have London or Pitts. But when we're talking about London and Pitts, I mean they literally set up like their target shares and their yards per route run were literally historic, up there with AJ Brown and the Titans, Julio Jones, Devontae Adams. And these are like top talents where I think Drake London is honestly better than Garrett Wilson. Maybe not for fantasy because he doesn't have that breakaway speed that Garrett Wilson has. But when it comes to route running, when it comes to frame, I think Drake London is up there as one of the top wide receivers in the league. And so when you can get such a concentrated offense with these amazing talents, I think you just have to bet on it. You know, I mean, the coach for the Falcons said that he's looking to be more balanced. And they already were throwing about 30 times a game with Ritter. So if you up that to 34, we're looking at literally a potential for one of them to have like 16 targets in a game, because they're probably going to have 35% target share each, maybe 40. And so that doesn't mean they're each going to have that every game. It's going to be lopsided. So you're going to get games where Pitts or London has literally 16 targets. You know, so I don't know.
It is the one thing with it's a bit of a challenge to stack the two of them together in some of these drafts, but I do assume that a lot of the drafts where Ritter goes undrafted, it's a case that whoever has drafted either of those two guys has passed up on them. This roster, Shawn, for me, you know, you could have went to a 3-quarterback build with it, but it didn't feel like at any point when we're making those selections that it really would have fit in. Like, you know, we could have passed on Musgrave for Howell, for example. Howell was 3 picks later, but again, then would have him running solo. I think with the way this team's built, we're really going for the upside scenario with the Packers. If the Packers are bad, this team is not going to be good. If the Packers are on a historic scoring season, this team's going to win us a lot of money. Feels like that's the way we've built this out.
Cap, it's interesting on the Falcons. I don't understand how, and kind of as Colm was just mentioning, I don't understand how either the Pitts or London drafter doesn't take Ritter in the 16th round every time. I don't understand.
18th round, Shawn, even in the 18th round, they didn't take him at all.
Well, sometimes I think that the drafters on those teams have already set themselves at quarterback, and there's maybe a concern that if you are playing through a quarterback who goes in 16, 17, 18, you might risk it and have someone take him, and then you don't have another path, which is one of the reasons why I like setting up Washington, San Francisco, so that you also have Howell and Purdy. I've got some teams that are just Howell and Ritter, and I actually think that when you think about it from a scenario perspective, it's not underpowered, right? When you think about it in terms of maybe the normal outcomes, then that's not enough. But I mean, if Howell and Ritter hit, if they don't get benched, if they go through and they make that jump that puts them in position to be foundation quarterbacks in the future, just Howell and Ritter by themselves with their options, with that being game stacked, that's not underpowered. And you can do that at the very final rounds. Cap, you've mentioned here about a lot of excitement about Atlanta, a lot of excitement about Chicago. I get the sense that you may have that game as one that you're playing very heavily through this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing that game very heavily through the Bears, Fields, and the pass catchers. When I get Fields through London or Pitts, I try to leave every draft with either London or Pitts. I mean, their stats last year with target shares were literally historic. So I'm really targeting that game heavy. And my friend and I, JJFC, was saying at this point he's going to have to get tickets to that game. So, I mean, yeah, I'm all in on those teams in that game. And I mean, when you can get, Watson at pick 40, and then we love Dobbs too, and Musgrave. I mean, Musgrave is 6'5" with like breakaway speed almost. So you're just betting on the talent and hoping and praying that Love puts up enough fantasy, which I really think he can. Look at what he did against the Eagles with not even expecting to play. So,
Shawn, Kappa's got us a bit hyped here for this one. We set the objective to win the regular season. I set the objective to win the regular season and the playoffs, win everything basically.
3.5 draft, 3.5.
Have we achieved our objectives here? Can they cut us the check?
Well, I mean, we've got to take Cap's prognostication on the Giants, right? I mean, if he's saying that this is the Daniel Jones breakout season, then that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. I just said I think that Howell and Ritter by themselves can work. Now, I do usually set it up for a third QB, but I want to make the point that if the scenario that you're actually playing plays out, that's not underpowered. And so you even want to consider doing some 2 QB teams like that, because if the scenario you're playing plays out, you don't want to waste a third pick. So you want to play it both ways a little bit. I love what we've done here. I love the fact that we timed out and I was able to barely get A-Chain in there. If we had taken Deshaun Watson, that would have been a huge bummer to destroy.
Well, I would have ended the draft and deleted it from anyone ever hearing it if that had happened. So
deleted it. We would have been like, all right, we'll auto pick the rest, start over here with Cap Fresh. But I really wanted to have that selection. Like I said, his ADP is in the next spot coming back around to us. So we did reach, but you've made the case that he's going to go earlier. Kind of as a final note on the draft for us, what are you seeing there? And then also as it relates to kind of this 3 running back group that is so, I don't know if controversial is exactly the right term, but it's difficult to play, where you look at the betting odds, you look at the reporting, you listen to the rumors, and we have Dalvin Cook going either to the Jets, the Patriots, or the Dolphins. If you go to the Jets or the Patriots, then you really damage this running back play at the 2-3 turn, or for Hall, potentially middle of third. Now, one of the things that we have seen since the betting odds switch to favor the Patriots is that Stevenson is really falling. You mentioned that A-Chain is going to go 4 rounds earlier. I would imagine that you're pretty confident that Dalvin Cook is not going to go to the Dolphins, or perhaps for all 3 of these teams that he's actually not going to make any difference.
Yeah, and we saw a report that was pretty damning about his assault, paying off of somebody, of the lady that's in question. So, I mean, that's pretty bad. Maybe it won't stop him from getting a job. If he does go to the Dolphins, okay, A-Chain's price is going to plummet, and that's going to be real bad. But I still think he's going to have ceiling weeks with his profile, with his role as a pass catcher in that prolific offense. So I'm not too concerned if Cook goes there, but it would obviously suppress his price crazy. So, I mean, I hope Cook goes to the Patriots, because I have almost no Ramondre. I think he kind of is a dead zone back. I mean, I'm seeing – explain Ramondre to me before we go. But, yeah, I mean, I would place large bet that A-Chain rises pretty dramatically after we see him catch a pass in the preseason. That's all it's going to take. It's him to catch a pass, and he's going to fly up the boards.
So you're not worried. You're not worried about the 2 guys who are a good fit in the offense behind him, or even perhaps starting the season in front of him. And you're not worried about. One of the things that's been so interesting with the Dolphins is how pass oriented they are and how concentrated, obviously, they are in those 2-star wide receivers. We thought we might get more running back value in Miami. I think that probably will tick up this season, but it has to be a little bit of a concern in a 3-way committee.
I mean, they only had 4 draft picks, I believe, and they drafted him in the 3rd round. That's a pretty sizable investment in A-Chain. And I think,
love it.
Yeah, I think they love him. And I mean, okay, they're good, but Mostert, he's getting up there in age, and they both have had injury concerns. I mean, I really honestly see it kind of like the Texans with Marlon Mack. I mean, I get they're way better than Marlon Mack, but I don't know. Something's telling me that this is kind of a Dameon Pierce situation. I could be dead wrong though.
Can we start making some Chris Johnson comps for Devin H?
I mean, I hope. I mean, yeah, I hope. I mean, I'll be very heavily invested in A-Chain, and I'm hoping he rises come August.
So we're looking at the 100 percentile outcome there with a CJ2K comparison.
I think we'll win. That's the case.
I think if he goes for 2,000 yards this season, he's a bargain in the 10th round. I will admit that. But an absolutely awesome draft, a lot of fun. Hopefully people have enjoyed listening in. We've loved doing it. Shawn, it's been an absolute blast having King Cap on. Make sure you follow King Cap on Twitter at King Capital with a K. It will be in today's show notes if you want to check it out there as well. Shawn, any final words as we close things out here?
Just thank you again to Cap for coming on. This has been the perfect show for the perfect draft. We appreciate the kind words that he has given us, but also just the chance to pick his brain and get going here on 2023. How many more teams do you have to go, Cap? Are we still looking across various formats, in the hundreds? How's your drafting schedule look over the next month?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be about 75, 80 BBMs by August, and early August, I'll look to get that to like 120, 125. But yeah, I have hundreds of drafts still to do.
Just getting started. So.
We're in the heat of the season. Come NFL season, that's when we relax, and that's when we listen to your guys' shows and just chill out and enjoy you guys talking.
That's the thing with these drafts. It's the 23rd of August. We're talking about, are we hundreds of drafts in? 3 years ago, that was not even something you could contemplate at this particular point in time. So going to be fun. The run-in to the season. We'll have some more drafts coming your way. But thanks to King Cap for jumping on for this one. Hopefully this team gives us a little bit of fun throughout the season. We can track it on the show if it is having a successful run. If it's not having a successful run, we'll keep it quiet. But I think we'll have a fun time here with, especially Shawn. There'll be some of the recap shows. I'm sure we'll have to hit this Packers stack up to see how we're going throughout week 1, week 2, week 3 of the season. That is going to do it for today's edition of the show. If you want to sign up over at RotoViz, you can use the code RVRadio2023 at checkout to get yourself 10% off. That will get you access to all of the content and tools up on the website, including all of Shawn's work, Blair's work, and much, much more. You can also sign up over at Underdog Fantasy if you haven't played over there already. You can use the code RotoViz to get yourself a 100% sign-up bonus up to $100. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime. My co-host is Shawn Siegele. And until we are back, have a good one.